David walked through the long shining halls of the Galactic School with a mixture of awe and unease. The walls curved with silver patterns that shifted like living light, and tall alien students of many species moved past him, their clothes glowing with colors of their worlds. He kept his steps steady, but inside he felt like the smallest being in the galaxy. Humans were rare here. The Galactic School was known as the greatest academy in the stars, a place where future leaders, scientists, and warriors of hundreds of worlds came to study. David had dreamed of being here since he was a child, but now that he had finally arrived, he wondered if he truly belonged. Most of the students were taller, stronger, or sharper in ways that humans could never match. He heard whispers as he walked by, some curious, some dismissive. To them, he was just another human who had somehow found his way into a school meant for greatness. He reached his first classroom and slipped quietly into a seat at the far end. His eyes scanned the room, taking in faces from every corner of the galaxy. There were scaled beings with emerald skin, insect-like students with shimmering wings, and tall figures with flowing hair that moved as if in water. Among all of them, one student stood out to him more than any other. Her name was Lyra. The moment David saw her, he understood why other students whispered her name in hushed tones. Lyra had long silver hair that glowed under the lights like threads of starlight. Her eyes were a bright, calm blue, and her movements carried a quiet grace that drew every gaze without effort. She sat near the front, her posture perfect, her presence soft yet impossible to ignore. Around her, even the proudest students lowered their voices. David had never seen anyone like her. He felt his chest tighten with a strange mixture of admiration and nervousness. He quickly looked away, afraid that if she caught him staring, he would be revealed as a fool. As the lesson began, David tried to focus, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. Lyra answered the teacher's questions with a voice that was clear and calm. She did not boast, nor did she try to show off. She spoke with a gentle strength that made her words sound important even when they were simple. During the break, David noticed a small group of students watching her from a distance. They whispered to each other about her royal background. She was not only beautiful, they said, but the daughter of a powerful leader from her world. That explained the respect she carried, the silence that followed her wherever she went. David felt the weight of that knowledge sink into him. She was not just a student. She was a princess. The thought made him smile bitterly. A human like him, with no title and no power, could never hope to even speak with her. He told himself it was better to admire her quietly, to keep his distance. But his heart did not listen. Every time she passed by, every time her eyes moved across the room, he felt drawn to her. As the day ended, David walked slowly back to his quarters. He passed tall windows that looked out into the endless stars, and for the first time since his arrival, he wondered if coming here had been a mistake. The Galactic School was a place where the strongest rose higher, where the brightest shined, and where someone like him could easily be forgotten. But as he remembered Lyra's calm voice in the classroom and the light in her eyes, he felt a spark of courage. He did not know her, and she would never notice him among the sea of students, but still, he promised himself that he would not give up. He would study harder, train longer, and prove that even a human had a place here. That night, as he lay in his bed staring at the soft glow of the ceiling, he whispered a silent vow. One day, he would speak to her. One day, he would find the courage to step into her world, even if it was far beyond his reach. For now, all he had was hope. But sometimes, hope was enough to begin a story that could change everything. The next morning, David sat nervously in the history classroom. His books were neatly stacked on the desk, though his mind was far from calm. He had promised himself the night before that he would not let fear keep him silent forever. Yet now, as he watched Lyra enter the room with quiet dignity, his courage melted away. She moved like flowing water, her silver hair catching the light, and every student turned their eyes toward her. She sat near the front as always, while David remained at the back, his hands pressed tightly together. When the teacher announced a group project, David's heart skipped. Students quickly formed into pairs, calling for friends or trusted partners. He sat still, waiting for someone to choose him, though he knew few would. Then the teacher looked across the room and said in a firm voice, "David, you will work with Lyra." The air grew heavy. A few students exchanged surprised glances, some even smirked. A human paired with the royal star of the school? It was almost unthinkable. David's stomach tightened as Lyra turned her head toward him. For a moment their eyes met, and he felt a rush of heat in his face. Then she smiled calm, gentle, and without judgment. They sat together for the first time, their books spread across the desk. David kept his eyes low at first, afraid he might say something foolish. But Lyra spoke softly, breaking the silence. "You are from Earth," she said. Her voice was smooth, carrying curiosity rather than mockery. "Yes," David answered, his voice quiet but steady. "It is small compared to most worlds here, but it is my home." She nodded, her blue eyes thoughtful. Small does not mean unworthy. Every world has a story worth learning. Her words struck him deeply. For weeks he had heard whispers that humans were weak, ordinary, or slow compared to other races. Yet here she was, the most admired student in the school, speaking of his world as if it mattered. As they began their project, David noticed how different she was from the image others carried of her. She was not proud or distant. She listened carefully when he spoke, asking questions with genuine interest. When he stumbled over a word or made a mistake, she laughed softly, not in cruelty, but in kindness. The sound of her laughter was warm, and for the first time in the school, David laughed too. Hours passed quickly as they worked together on the history of ancient galactic treaties. David explained how humans saw alliances as bonds of trust, while Lyra shared how her people viewed them as sacred promises tied to honor. The two perspectives blended into something greater, and they wrote their notes side by side with growing ease. During a pause, Lyra rested her chin lightly on her hand and studied him. "Most people here are afraid to speak to me," she said quietly. "They see only the crown of my family, not the person I am." David looked at her, surprised by the sadness in her tone. "You are more than a title," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Anyone who cannot see that is blind." Her eyes widened slightly, then softened with gratitude. She gave him another small smile, one that felt different, less formal, more real. For a brief moment, David forgot the gap between their worlds. He forgot her crown, her beauty, and his own doubts. He saw her as a person, someone carrying loneliness beneath all the admiration. When the bell rang, Lyra gathered her books and turned to him. "Thank you, David. I enjoyed this time." He nodded quickly, not trusting himself to speak more. As she walked away, students whispered around him, some curious, others jealous. Yet David felt none of it mattered. He had spoken to her, worked with her, and seen a glimpse of the person behind the name. As he left the classroom, a strange feeling stirred in his chest. It was more than admiration now. It was a connection, fragile yet undeniable, and it gave him a strength he had never known before. he whispered to himself as he walked down the shining halls, she is not untouchable after all. The school corridors were quiet in the early morning. David had arrived earlier than usual, hoping to prepare for the next lesson. Carrying his books, he pushed open the door to the history classroom. The room was dim, only half lit by the pale glow of the star outside. At first, he thought the room was empty. Then a sharp voice cut through the silence. "You are a disappointment, Lyra." David froze. He turned his head slowly and saw Lyra standing near the front desk, her books clutched tightly to her chest. In front of her stood the history teacher, a tall alien with gray skin and eyes like cold stone. His voice was low but filled with anger. "You think your royal blood is enough to carry you," the teacher continued. "But you are weak. Your answers are shallow. Even the human beside you shows more effort than you." David's heart pounded as the words sank in. The teacher's tone was cruel, each sentence meant to crush her spirit. Lyra kept her head bowed, her silver hair falling forward to hide her face. She did not answer. She only stood still, like someone used to hearing such words. The teacher stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his cruelty. "Your family may protect you outside these walls, but here you are mine to judge. Remember that." David gripped the strap of his bag tightly. He wanted to shout, to step forward, but his feet felt heavy. This was a teacher, an authority figure, and he was just a student. If he interfered, he could be punished. Yet every part of him burned with anger as he watched Lyra's shoulders tremble. Finally, the teacher turned away, gathering his notes. "Do not fail again," he said sharply before leaving the room without noticing David. For a moment, silence filled the classroom. David stood frozen, his chest tight, unsure if he should reveal he had been there. Then Lyra slowly lifted her head. Her eyes glistened, but she quickly brushed her face with the back of her hand as if nothing had happened. When she finally noticed him near the door, her eyes widened in surprise. For a long moment they stared at each other. David opened his mouth to speak, but Lyra shook her head quickly. "Please," she whispered, her voice soft and strained. "Do not tell anyone. Forget what you saw." David stepped closer, his words tumbling out in a rush. "He should not have spoken to you like that. It was wrong." Her eyes softened, but she gave a weak smile. "It does not matter. Teachers are respected. If you speak against him, you will only bring trouble upon yourself." "But it hurts you," David said firmly. Lyra shook her head again, hiding her pain behind calm words. "I am used to it. My life has always been filled with expectations. If I cannot meet them, then maybe I deserve his words." David stared at her, stunned by how easily she accepted such cruelty. He wanted to argue, to tell her she deserved kindness and respect, but her expression stopped him. She did not want pity. She wanted silence. The classroom door opened, and other students began to enter. Lyra straightened quickly, her face calm once more, as if nothing had happened. She sat in her seat, her hands steady, her posture perfect. No one could guess what she had just endured. David returned to his place at the back, his thoughts heavy. As the lesson began, he watched her answer questions with her usual grace, her voice clear and even. Yet he could not forget the trembling in her shoulders, the way her eyes had glistened. That day, David realized something important. Lyra was not untouchable. She was not only the most beautiful student in the school or the royal figure admired by all. She was also vulnerable, carrying pain that no one else seemed to see. And as he sat there, silent but burning inside, David made a choice. He would not look away again. The next day began like any other, but David carried a storm inside him. He had not slept well after what he saw. Lyra's soft plea for silence echoed in his mind, but so did the teacher's cruel words. He tried to bury the memory, yet every time he glanced at her, sitting tall and graceful at the front of the class, his chest tightened. The morning lesson started quietly. Students opened their books, their voices low as they prepared to answer questions. The teacher moved to the center of the room, his gray face cold and stern. For a while, everything seemed normal. But David knew better. The teacher called on Lyra. "Explain the Treaty of the Seventh Era." Lyra stood, her voice calm though her hands held her book tightly. She explained what she had studied, her words clear and thoughtful. But before she could finish, the teacher raised his hand sharply. "Wrong," he said. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Several students looked down at their desks. A few exchanged glances, waiting for what would come next. "You speak as if you are reading a story," the teacher continued. "Empty words. You are supposed to be a princess of wisdom, yet you cannot even give a proper answer." Lyra lowered her eyes. She did not defend herself. The teacher's voice grew louder. "You shame your family. Even the human next to you has shown more value in this class than you. Imagine that, a human, rising higher than royalty." The classroom stirred. A few students tried to hide their laughter, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. David felt his fists tighten. The heat in his chest grew unbearable. He looked at Lyra, who stood silently, her face pale but her eyes holding back tears. Something inside him broke. He pushed his chair back and stood. His voice rang across the classroom, clear and steady. "Enough." The room went silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward him in shock. No one had ever spoken to a teacher like that. David's heart pounded, but he did not sit down. "You cannot speak to her this way," he said firmly. "She answered your question with respect. She deserves the same respect from you." The teacher turned slowly, his cold eyes narrowing. "Sit down, human. This is not your matter." "It is my matter when I see someone treated unfairly," David replied. His voice trembled, but he forced himself to continue. "You are supposed to teach, not break your students." The silence stretched. No one dared to breathe. Even Lyra looked at him with wide eyes, her lips parted in disbelief. The teacher's face hardened. "You dare challenge me in front of the class?" "Yes," David said. "Because it is wrong." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Some students hid their excitement behind their hands, others looked terrified. No one had expected the quiet human to stand against authority. The teacher stepped closer to David, his tall figure looming over him. "You think courage will save you? You will regret this." David stood his ground, even though his knees felt weak. "I would rather regret speaking than regret staying silent." For a moment, the teacher seemed ready to strike him down with words sharper than before. But then the bell rang, breaking the tension. The class ended, and students began to gather their things quickly, their eyes darting between David and the teacher. The teacher's voice was cold as he spoke. "David, you will come before the council. Let us see what they decide about your insolence." David nodded, his jaw tight. He knew punishment was certain, but he did not care. He glanced once more at Lyra. She sat frozen, her eyes locked on him, her face filled with something between shock and gratitude. As the students filed out, the whispers grew louder. Some called him foolish, others called him brave. David walked out of the classroom with his head high, even as fear twisted in his stomach. He had no idea what the council would decide. But he knew one thing: he could not stand by and watch Lyra suffer alone. The council chamber was vast and heavy with silence. Golden lights glowed from the tall crystal pillars, and the air carried the weight of authority. David stood at the center, surrounded by 12 council members seated in a circle. Their robes shimmered with the colors of their planets, and their eyes were sharp, judging every move he made. He felt the pressure of their gaze like a mountain on his shoulders. His hands curled into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to stand tall. The history teacher stood off to the side, his gray face filled with cold satisfaction. He had already spoken against David, calling him reckless, disrespectful, and unfit to remain in the school. A council member with golden skin leaned forward. "David of Earth, you are accused of defying a teacher in public. Do you admit this?" David's heart raced, but his voice came out steady. "Yes. I spoke against him. Because what he said to Lyra was not teaching, it was cruelty." The chamber stirred with murmurs. Some council members frowned, others raised their brows in surprise. Few students had ever dared to accuse a teacher in this sacred hall. Another council member, tall and cloaked in silver, asked, "Do you have proof of this cruelty?" David's throat tightened. Proof? He had only his own eyes and ears. If he spoke of what he saw, Lyra would be dragged into this too, and she had begged him to stay silent. For a moment, he hesitated, caught between truth and his promise. "I saw enough," David said finally. "I cannot stand by while someone is broken down by words meant to harm. If that is my fault, then I accept it." The teacher stepped forward, his voice loud and stern. "You see, council. The human does not even deny his disrespect. He dares to question our ways. He is unfit to remain here." David's chest burned with anger, but he held his tongue. He would not argue further. He had already spoken his truth. The council began to deliberate in low voices. Every second felt like an hour. David's mind raced with the possible outcomes: expulsion, shame for his family, or worse. Yet even as fear gripped him, he felt no regret. He had done what he believed was right. Behind him, the doors of the chamber opened. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. The council turned as Lyra entered. Her silver hair caught the light, and her calm presence filled the chamber like a rising tide. The teacher stiffened in surprise. "Princess, you should not." "I should," Lyra interrupted. Her voice was clear and steady, though her hands held her books tightly. She walked to the center and stood beside David. "The council deserves the truth." David's eyes widened. He had not expected her to come. Lyra faced the council. "The teacher has spoken harshly to me for weeks. He has mocked me, belittled me, and tried to crush my spirit." David did not defy him without cause. "David protected me when I could not protect myself." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some members looked shocked, others leaned closer in thought. The teacher's face turned pale with anger. "You lie," he spat. "You wish to protect the human, nothing more." Lyra stood tall. "I do not lie. And I will not be silent. If you expel him, then I will leave the school as well." The entire chamber fell into stunned silence. A princess threatening to leave carried heavy weight. The council members exchanged serious looks. None could ignore her words or the political storm that would follow if she departed. At last, The golden-skinned council member raised a hand for silence. We will consider this carefully. The matter is no longer simple discipline, it has become larger than this hall. David stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had expected punishment, but instead, Lyra's courage had changed everything. She had stood beside him, risking her own standing for his sake. As the council dismissed them for deliberation, David and Lyra walked out together. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Lyra whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "I could not let you stand alone." David glanced at her, his chest tight with a strange mixture of gratitude and admiration. He had wanted to protect her, but now he realized she was just as willing to protect him. The council chamber filled again the next day, but this time the atmosphere was heavier than before. The story of what happened had already spread through the school. Students whispered in the corridors, some calling David reckless, others calling him brave. And everyone waited to see what Lyra would do. David stood once more in the center of the chamber. The teacher sat to the side, his face sharp with anger. Council members watched silently, their robes shimmering in the light. The weight of their judgment pressed hard on the air. Then the doors opened. Lyra entered with her head held high. She was not dressed in her usual school robes but in a flowing gown of soft silver, a reminder of her royal heritage. Every step she took echoed in the chamber, carrying the power of her choice. The golden-skinned council member spoke first. "Princess Lyra, yesterday you spoke in defense of the human. Do you still stand by your words?" "I do," she said clearly. "And today I will add more." David did not act out of arrogance. He acted out of courage, when others remained silent. If he is punished for defending me, then let me share his punishment, for I did not have the strength to speak sooner. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several council members leaned closer to one another, speaking quickly under their breath. The teacher stood, his voice sharp. "This is foolishness. A human student challenges authority, and now the princess risks her name to protect him. He has bewitched her with lies." "No," Lyra replied, turning toward him. Her calm voice carried across the room, silencing the whispers. "I have been silent because I feared shame. But I will not fear any more. Your words were cruel. They were not teaching, they were meant to break. That is the truth." For the first time, David saw fire in her eyes. Not the quiet sadness he had seen before, but real strength. She was no longer hiding behind grace and silence. She was standing tall, even if the entire council watched her. The silver-robed council member asked carefully, "Do you understand what you risk, princess? Speaking against a teacher of this school is no small matter. If your words are false, you will stain your family's honor." "I understand," Lyra answered. "But I will not let fear control me any longer." She glanced at David. "If he can stand, then so can I." The silence grew heavy once again. But then a sound broke it, a voice from the side. "I saw it too," said a student who had entered quietly. It was a tall boy from another class. "I saw how the teacher treated her." Another voice followed. "And I heard his words." Slowly, more students stepped into the chamber. They had gathered outside, listening, waiting. Now they came forward, standing behind Lyra and David. One by one, they spoke of moments when they had witnessed the teacher's cruelty. The teacher's face darkened. "Lies. All of you. Lies to protect them." But the tide had already shifted. The voices of many outweighed the denial of one. The golden-skinned council member raised a hand for silence. His expression was unreadable. The council has heard enough. This is no longer a matter of a single student's disobedience. It is a matter of truth and justice. The teacher's protest was cut off by another council member. You will remain silent until we reach our judgment. David stood still, hardly able to breathe. He had walked into this chamber ready to be punished, ready to accept whatever fate awaited him. But now, he was no longer standing alone. Lyra had chosen to stand with him, and others had followed her lead. As the council members began their private discussion, David glanced at Lyra. She stood with her shoulders straight, her eyes calm but shining with determination. For the first time since entering the Galactic School, David felt something new rise inside him, not just courage, but belonging. He was not just a human among giants. He was part of something larger, and it was because of her. The council's decision was yet to come, but in his heart David already knew that no matter the outcome, this moment had changed everything. The council chamber was silent as the members returned from their private discussion. Their faces were serious, their robes glowing faintly in the golden light. Every student in the room held their breath. David stood in the center, with Lyra beside him, her silver gown shining softly. Behind them, more students waited, watching with anxious eyes. The golden-skinned council member raised his hand. His voice was calm but firm. We have reached a decision. The words we heard are not light claims. The truth has been spoken by more than one voice. The council cannot ignore it. He turned his gaze toward the teacher. You have misused your authority. You chose cruelty instead of guidance. This school was built to raise leaders, not to crush spirits. For this, you are removed from your position. Gasps echoed across the chamber. The teacher's face turned pale with rage, but he could not speak. Two guards stepped forward and led him away. His protests faded into silence as the doors closed behind him. The golden-skinned council member then faced David. As for you, David of Earth, you stood against authority, but you did so not for pride, but for justice. Such courage is rare, especially from one so new to our halls. Instead of punishment, you shall carry recognition. You have reminded us of the values this school must protect. The chamber filled with murmurs of surprise and approval. Some students nodded with respect, others clapped softly before the council silenced them again. David felt his chest tighten, his heart pounding. He had expected exile, yet now he was being honored. Finally, the council turned to Lyra. And you, princess? You chose truth over fear. You risked your name to defend what was right. This act honors your family more than silence ever could. May your courage guide others. Lyra bowed gracefully. Thank you, honored council. I only did what was needed. The meeting ended, but the weight of the moment remained as David and Lyra walked out of the chamber together. The students who had spoken up earlier followed, their eyes filled with respect. Some even nodded to David as they passed, no longer seeing him as just a human outsider. Outside, the school grounds glowed under the light of twin suns. Lyra stopped near the tall crystal fountain, her hair catching the rays like threads of silver fire. David stood beside her, unsure what to say. His heart was full, but words felt too small. She turned to him with a gentle smile. You should not have stood for me, David. You could have been cast out. I could not watch in silence, he replied softly. It did not matter what happened to me. It mattered that someone needed to say the truth. Her smile grew warmer. And because of that, You changed everything. You made me believe I am not alone. For a long moment, they stood together, the sounds of the school fading around them. Lyra's eyes met his, calm but shining with something deeper than gratitude. You are not weak, David, she said. You are stronger than most who call themselves great. David looked at her, and for the first time he did not feel small in this vast place. He felt as if he belonged, not because of titles or power, but because he had chosen to act when it mattered. Days turned into weeks, and the story spread across the campus. The human who had stood against a teacher was no longer a stranger. Students greeted him, some with admiration, others with curiosity. Yet David cared less for their opinions now. His focus was on Lyra, who walked beside him more often, no longer distant, no longer untouchable. Their friendship grew quietly but firmly, like roots beneath the soil. Together they studied, laughed, and shared the weight of expectations. For David, it was the beginning of something greater than he had ever imagined when he first arrived at the school. And so, the human who once felt small among giants found his place not by strength of body, but by strength of heart.